Welcome the anointed ones. Some people studied you like a science project only to realize too late you were the scientist the whole damn time. Pause and let that sink in. Because listen, there's a level of genius they never expected from you. Not from the quiet one, not from the misunderstood one, not from the scapegoat they thought would stay broken, confused, and begging forever. But somehow, and this is what's frying their circuits, you figured it out. All of it. The game, the gaslighting, the generational lies wrapped in tradition, the fake friends in holy costumes, the silent assassins in your own family. And now, they're not just shocked, they're low-key terrified, because you didn't just survive the setup. You decoded the system, you saw through the spiritual fog, you cracked what they thought was uncrackable. Them. Here's a fact. Most people never awaken from the Matrix because it's designed to feel like comfort. But you crawled through hell and still had the audacity to ask, wait, who built this damn place? And now that you're walking in clarity, they're scrambling behind closed doors, whispering, how the F***Seekeek did they figure this out? Plot twist. While they were busy plotting on your downfall, you were quietly plotting your elevation. And no, you didn't need a magic potion, a YouTube ritual, or a coven of co-signers. You just needed truth. And baby, once you touched that truth, it was game over for the whole illusion. Buckle up, because today we're pulling back the curtain on why they're shook, silent, and secretly watching your every move. Let's go. Number 1, you decoded the lie while they were still worshipping it. They never thought you'd catch on. They were so confident in their deception, so proud of the little illusion they built, they didn't even think to hide it properly. To them, you were just another pawn, someone easy to control, emotionally vulnerable, maybe even a little too trusting. They thought their manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly disguised as love, support, or authority that you'd never question it. But while they were busy lying to you, you were busy noticing things, tiny patterns, strange inconsistencies, moments where the math didn't math. You didn't just wake up one day with answers. You sat with your confusion. You questioned everything. You paid attention. That's what they never saw coming. They were still clapping for the lie, still defending it, still teaching others how to live inside it. Meanwhile, you were sitting quietly, gathering pieces, holding back your reactions, letting the truth form slowly and painfully. That's what people don't get. You didn't just figure it out like a movie scene. You endured the truth in real time. You bled through it. You had nights where your head felt like it was splitting in half because what you were realizing went against everything you were taught to believe. And you still kept digging. They mocked your silence, called you distant, cold, crazy. But you weren't disconnected. You were focused. You were decoding a system designed to break you, and you did it without a handbook, without a support group, without anyone to verify your sanity. You figured it out in private. That's why they're in awe. Because most people stay stuck in the illusion their whole lives. They conform, they submit, they never ask questions, and if they do, they back off the moment it gets uncomfortable. But you leaned in. You let it unravel. You let go of the need to be liked, to be accepted, to be understood. And in doing so, you saw the entire game, how they twist guilt into obedience, how they weaponize loyalty, how they hide their intentions behind fake kindness. You saw it all. And now they're looking at you like you're some kind of magician. But you're not magic. You're just awake. And that's scarier than anything they've ever known. Number 2, you became fluent in energies they can't even sense. Most people only respond to what they can see or hear. They get fooled by smiles, compliments, social status, even carefully chosen Bible verses. But you moved differently. You didn't just listen to what people said. You listened to the energy behind their words. You didn't need proof. You didn't need a fight. You could walk into a room and feel when something was off. You could look someone in the eyes and know they were lying, even if they were saying all the right things. That kind of awareness doesn't come from reading books or watching videos. It comes from spiritual survival, from learning the hard way that vibes don't lie, even when people do. That's why they don't know how to handle you anymore. You're not reacting to the surface. You're tuned in to the deeper level, the real frequency underneath the mask. They think they're slick, that they can switch up their tone or throw a compliment to disarm you. But you feel the hidden bitterness, the quiet jealousy, the energy of someone who wants access to your peace but not responsibility for the damage they've caused. And once your spirit reads it, you can't unsee it. You don't need to argue. You just distance yourself, and that drives them crazy. People are used to performing. They're used to putting on faces and roles that get them by in this world, but you stopped falling for the performance. You started feeling the truth instead. That's what separates you. You're not guessing, you know. And when you know, you don't beg for clarity, you don't demand explanations, you just remove yourself and watch how quickly the mask falls. That's why they whisper about you. That's why they say you're too much or too sensitive. Because you see through their carefully crafted image. They can't hide from you. And the wild part is, you never needed proof. You didn't need to catch them in the act. You could just feel who was for you and who was playing games. That ability freaks them out, because they don't understand how you knew. But you're not operating off logic alone anymore. You've tapped into spiritual intelligence, and once you access that, there's no fooling you, only exposing themselves. Number 3, you outsmarted generational mind control without a manual. You were born into programming. Before you could even speak, you were being taught who to trust, what to believe, how to act, and when to stay silent. The rules weren't always spoken out loud, but they were enforced through guilt, fear, punishment, and approval. You were conditioned to obey, to ignore your gut, to shrink yourself in order to survive the emotional chaos around you. Generational dysfunction was labeled as culture, as tradition, as this is just how it is. And most people never question it. They spend their whole lives trapped in inherited mindsets, passing on the same pain they swore they'd never repeat. But you started asking questions. And the moment you did, you broke the unspoken law. Because in families and communities ruled by control, curiosity is rebellion. You started noticing the double standards, how love was used as leverage, how silence was expected after betrayal, how emotional manipulation was disguised as protection. You saw that people weren't healing, they were recycling trauma and calling it wisdom. You saw that the people who demanded loyalty were often the ones doing the most harm, and somehow, without a mentor or a guide, you began to untangle yourself from it all. That's the part that shocks them. You didn't have a blueprint. No one handed you the steps. You just knew something was wrong, and you trusted yourself enough to go find out why. You chose to break the curse instead of continuing the pattern, and you did it alone. Late nights, deep questions, painful realizations. You taught yourself how to think outside the mental cage they locked you in. That's spiritual intelligence. That's not regular, that's not common, that's not easy. They wonder how you see through their tactics now, how you're so mentally strong, why you don't fall apart like you used to. It's because you reprogrammed your mind from the inside out. You no longer respond to guilt trips, you don't entertain gaslighting, you don't second guess your intuition because you've seen the whole design. You pulled yourself out of generational programming without losing your soul. And now they're uncomfortable because they're still stuck in what you escaped from. And deep down they know you didn't just figure it out, you freed yourself. Number 4, you didn't just wake up, you remembered. You didn't stumble on this wisdom by accident, you didn't get it from a podcast, a book, or some flashy guru on the internet. What's living in you can't be Googled. You didn't just wake up, you remembered. You reconnected with a truth that's been buried inside you since before you were born. While others were trying to figure life out through trial and error, you started pulling answers from somewhere deeper. You couldn't explain how you knew what you knew, you just knew. And that confused a lot of people. They thought you were just getting into spirituality or going through a phase. They thought this was some trend, but your clarity didn't come from study. It came from soul memory. You've been here before, you've seen systems like this collapse before, you've faced these types of spirits in different bodies, you recognize the energy even when the face is changed. That's why your reactions are so precise, that's why your discernment is so sharp, that's why your spirit flinches at the smallest shift in someone's energy. It's not paranoia, it's memory. You didn't need to be taught, you just needed to be triggered enough to remember. Pain activated your knowing. Isolation sharpened your vision, and betrayal unlocked your inner library. That's the secret. The trauma didn't destroy you, it revealed you. It peeled back the layers and reconnected you to something eternal. They're in awe because you move like someone with inside information. You speak like someone who's lived 10 lives. You make decisions that don't make sense to the average person. but they always end up right. And the reason they can't copy you, study you, or imitate you is because what you carry isn't from this time. It's embedded in your spiritual DNA. So no, you're not arrogant, you're not delusional, you're not doing too much. You just remembered who the hell you are, and that alone is enough to shift the atmosphere and make people uncomfortable without you saying a single word, because the world wasn't ready for you to remember, but you did, and now nothing will ever be the same. Number 5, you played dumb long enough to study their whole playbook. You knew from the beginning that something was off. The words didn't match the energy. The smiles didn't match the intentions. But instead of reacting, you did something that threw them off completely. You stayed silent. Not out of fear, not because you were clueless, but because you were studying. You let them believe you were naive, soft, and harmless. You let them feel superior while they exposed themselves in real time. And while they underestimated you, you were mentally recording every contradiction, every manipulative trick, every time they slipped up and revealed who they really were. That was your power. You didn't move emotionally, you moved strategically. You watched how they switched up depending on who was in the room. You paid attention to how they used charm to disarm people. You noticed the passive-aggressive comments, the guilt trips disguised as concern, the sudden changes in tone when you stopped giving them access. You let them run their game while you quietly memorized the rule book they were playing by. They mistook your patience for stupidity. They had no idea you were 5 steps ahead, just waiting for the perfect moment to shift. And when that moment came, you didn't need to shout. You didn't need revenge. You just moved, smart, clean, and with no warning. That's what's eating them alive right now. They don't know how to undo it. They thought they had you wrapped up in confusion, trauma, and obligation. But what they didn't realize was that while they were trying to control your narrative, you were writing your own ending. Now they're scrambling, panicking, trying to figure out how you knew so much, how you saw through them so clearly, but they gave you the information themselves. Every insult, every fake apology, every mood shift. You filed it all away. They handed you the entire blueprint of who they are, and you didn't even have to ask. You didn't need revenge, you just needed time. And now that you've made your move, they can't undo it. You saw everything. You stayed quiet until it counted. And now they're realizing you weren't the fool in the room. You were the observer they should have never played with. Number 6, you listened to the pain they tried to drown out. Most people run from pain. They bury it under busyness, hide it behind fake smiles, distract themselves with work, sex, religion, gossip, anything to avoid sitting with the truth. They treat pain like the enemy, but you leaned into it. You didn't numb it. You didn't dress it up and call it strength. You sat in the raw discomfort and listened to it. You let it speak. And what it told you changed everything. You started asking questions most people avoid their entire lives. Why am I really hurting? What am I carrying that doesn't belong to me? Why do I keep attracting the same kind of pain? And the moment you got quiet enough to hear the answers, the illusions started breaking. The masks slipped, the patterns got clearer, and the people around you, they got uncomfortable because your healing required truth. And truth doesn't play nice with pretense. You realized that silence wasn't always peace. It was often a cage. That the version of yourself they loved was the version that didn't challenge anything. That your pain had been dismissed so many times you almost believed it wasn't real. But instead of running from all that, you confronted it. You stopped looking for external fixes. You stopped blaming everybody else. And you turned inward with brutal honesty. That's what unlocked your wisdom. That's where your discernment came from. That's why your energy hits different now. People can't understand how you became so clear, so grounded, so untouchable. It's because while they avoided the fire, you stepped straight into it and let it burn away everything false. You lost the illusions, you lost the fantasy version of people you once protected. You lost your attachment to being liked. But what you gained was power, real power, quiet power. The kind that can't be shaken because it was built in the middle of your worst pain. Now they look at you with confusion. They don't know how you got so deep. They don't understand how you carry so much wisdom without bitterness. But that's because they never stayed in the pain long enough to let it teach them. You did. You didn't run from the wound. You became the flame. Number 7, you made peace with being the villain in their story. You stopped chasing their approval, and that was the beginning of your real freedom. They expected you to keep apologizing for things you didn't do, to keep explaining yourself to people who had already decided not to understand you. They thought you'd keep trying to win them over, fix the misunderstanding, smooth things over. But something inside you snapped, not in a bitter way, but in a liberating, soul-saving kind of way. You realized that no matter how kind, honest, or loyal you were, they had already painted you as the problem. So you stopped fighting it. You let them have their version of the story. That's what threw them off. They wanted you stuck in shame. They wanted you desperate for redemption. But you let them believe whatever helped them sleep at night and walked away with your peace. You stopped trying to control the narrative and started focusing on healing, that kind of detachment, that kind of self-respect. It's terrifying to people who depend on control and guilt to feel powerful. They wanted you to keep defending yourself, to stay caught in the loop of proving your heart, your intentions, your truth. But you chose silence, you chose alignment, you chose becoming. You understood something most people never figure out. It's okay to be the villain in someone else's story if it means being the hero in your own life. And here's what's wild. They labeled you the problem because you said no, because you set boundaries, because you stopped allowing the same cycles to repeat. And instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you embraced it. You wore the label like armor. Misfit? Fine. Difficult? Okay. Threat? Absolutely. If being all of that meant reclaiming your sanity, your energy, your clarity, so be it. You didn't just bounce back from their rejection. You evolved because of it. You stopped trying to fit into the box they built for you and built your own space instead. And now that you're thriving, glowing, and unbothered, they're spinning. Because the story they told about you doesn't match who you've become. And the truth is, they needed you to stay broken to feel right. But you chose to rise. And that decision changed everything. Number 8, you caught the pattern they rebranded as personality. They had a whole act, and for a while it worked. The manipulation was so smooth it looked like charisma. The backhanded insults came with a smile, so people called it just being real. The mood swings, the gaslighting, the guilt trips, rebranded as personality quirks. That's just how they are. Don't take it personal. They mean well, but you weren't fooled. Not anymore. You started seeing the pattern underneath the behavior, the repetition, the intent, the control hidden in every little interaction. And once you saw it for what it really was, you couldn't unsee it. You realized that what people were calling personality was actually a carefully constructed defense system designed to dominate, deflect, and avoid accountability. It wasn't random, it was strategy. The charming narcissist used humor and compliments to get in close, only to drain you later. The passive-aggressive relative mastered the art of low-key insults and weaponized silence to keep you confused. The so-called spiritual person used mystical language to shame you into submission, making themselves look like the enlightened one while quietly feeding off your insecurity. It wasn't personality, it was power play, every time. And while everyone else kept brushing it off or defending them, you started calling it what it was: manipulation, control, abuse. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but with clarity, with calm detachment. You stopped making excuses for them. You stopped twisting yourself to accommodate their dysfunction. And that's when everything shifted. Because their power only worked as long as you stayed confused. The moment you gave it a name, the spell broke. They lost control the moment you stopped playing along. They had built their entire identity around people never catching on. But you caught on. You connected the dots. You noticed how they only joked when it was time to humiliate you. How they only offered support when there was something in it for them. You noticed the patterns in the chaos. And instead of getting pulled into it, you stepped out. That's what they can't forgive you for. Not that you exposed them publicly, but that you woke up internally. You became immune to the very tactics they used to keep everyone else stuck. And now, their tricks don't work. Their image doesn't intimidate you. Their presence doesn't shake you because you saw the pattern and broke it. Number 9. You used isolation to build a private empire. They laughed at your absence. They said you were acting funny, going ghost, being distant. They made jokes about how you fell off, how you disappeared like you had nothing going for you. But what they didn't realize was that your isolation wasn't a breakdown, it was a blueprint. You weren't hiding, you were healing. You weren't lost. You were strategically unplugging from anything that distracted you from your becoming. While they were busy performing for validation, you were in solitude, pulling yourself back together, piece by powerful piece. No one talks about how brutal that season is. The silence is loud, the loneliness aches, the doubt creeps in. But you stayed with it. You let it strip away every illusion, every fake connection, every crutch you leaned on, every part of you that was still performing to be liked. You weren't interested in clapping back. You weren't chasing closure. You were in the shadows doing the internal surgery that most people avoid for a lifetime. You read, reflected, cried, fasted, prayed, disconnected, and rebuilt without an audience, without applause, and without needing anyone to understand. That kind of work doesn't make noise. It doesn't come with social media posts or highlight reels. It happens in the unseen. And that's why they're so stunned by who you are now, because you didn't announce your growth. You became it. Now you walk with a calm confidence. You see through things quicker. You no longer force connections. You have boundaries. You know your worth. And they're whispering, asking, when did they get like this? But the real ones know. It wasn't a glow-up, it was a resurrection. What they thought was your downfall was actually your incubation. You were being spiritually upgraded in silence, and here's the truth. You didn't do it to make a statement. You weren't plotting revenge or trying to prove a point. You just knew that if you stayed where you were, you'd lose yourself. So you left the noise. And in the quiet, you found everything you were looking for. Now they're watching, confused, impressed, maybe even intimidated. But the work was never for them. It was for your becoming. And you did it with no fanfare, just faith, fire, and follow through. Number 10, you crushed every label they weaponized against you. They tried to define you before you even knew who you were. Too sensitive, they said, as if your empathy was a weakness. Too intense, they muttered, because your presence made shallow people uncomfortable. Too quiet, because you didn't play the game of small talk and fake smiles. Too weird, because your mind didn't follow the script they were all trained to recite. But here's the twist. Everything they labeled as a flaw was actually a clue, a marker, a divine signature of the soul you came here with. And instead of letting those words break you, you turned every single one of them into power. You started seeing the truth behind their labels. They called you too sensitive because you could feel what others tried to hide. You picked up on energy, body language, intentions, and that scared people who were used to getting away with deception. You were too intense because you asked the questions no one wanted to answer, because your presence demanded realness in a world built on pretending. Too quiet? That was code for, I can't manipulate you because you're not giving me access. And too weird. That just meant you weren't willing to die in the box they built for everyone else. At first, those words stung. They made you doubt yourself, question your value, water yourself down just to be accepted. But somewhere along the way, you woke up. You realized that what they tried to shame out of you was actually sacred. And instead of shrinking, you started shining. You stopped apologizing. You stopped editing yourself to make others comfortable. You stood in your fullness. And that's when things started shifting. Now, the same people who mocked you are watching from a distance, confused. They don't get how the black sheep became the blueprint, how the one they underestimated is now walking in clarity, power, and peace. They're whispering, how did they do it? But they'll never understand that your strength didn't come from proving them wrong. It came from finally believing that you were never wrong to begin with. You didn't just reject the labels, they became your fuel. They tried to bury you under them, but you used every word as a stepping stone. And now you stand above it all, unbothered, undeniable, and unapologetically you. Number 11. You didn't just question authority. You became your own. You spent so much of your life being told who to listen to, the parent who claimed they knew best, the religious leader who said questioning was rebellion, the teacher who rewarded obedience but punished curiosity. The system taught you that authority meant power, and that power was always outside of you. So for a long time, you gave it away. You doubted your instincts. You silenced your voice. You waited for validation before you made a move. You wanted to be good, approved, accepted, and they loved that version of you. Compliant, quiet, unsure. But life kept pushing you into moments where the people you trusted most failed you. The ones who said they'd protect you turned a blind eye. The ones who spoke of God misused his name to control you. The titles lost their shine. The sermons felt hollow. The rules started sounding like chains. And in the silence of your own soul, you realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. No one was coming to save you. That truth cracked something open. You stopped waiting for someone to give you permission to rise. You stopped checking with external authority to see if your calling was valid. You stopped letting fear, guilt, or tradition override your inner truth. And in doing so, you stepped into something sacred, your own authority, not the kind that needs a mic or a platform. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and who you answer to, no middleman needed. That's what shook them. You no longer flinched when they pulled the old control tactics. You no longer cared about titles, reputations, or approval. You had your own relationship with the divine now. You trusted your own discernment. You could spot manipulation even when it was wrapped in scripture or dressed in concern. You were no longer loyal to systems. You were loyal to truth. And now they can't touch you because you're not reacting. You're sovereign. You don't need their seat at the table. You built your own. You became your own authority, not out of arrogance, but because you remembered the sacred power that was planted in you before anyone could label you. And that kind of liberation, it's the one thing they can't control. Number 12, you alchemized betrayal into a GPS. Every person who betrayed you thought they were setting you back. They thought their lies, their silence, their rejection would break you, humble you, humiliate you. What they didn't realize is they were being used, not by you, but by the universe itself, by something bigger, wiser, and way more strategic than any of their petty agendas. Because every time someone hurt you, abandoned you, used you, or underestimated you, it triggered something, not just anger, not just pain. It triggered direction. You didn't just survive betrayal, you decoded it. You stopped taking it personally and started asking bigger questions. What is this showing me? What is this forcing me to confront? Where is this trying to lead me? And once you shifted from victim mode to visionary mode, something snapped into place. The lies showed you what real truth felt like. The loss showed you what you were clinging to. The betrayal exposed the cracks in the foundation you were building on. And instead of collapsing, you rerouted. That's what people don't get. They see your growth and assume life suddenly got easier for you. But they don't see how every betrayal was actually a breadcrumb. Every disappointment pointed you closer to your purpose. Every heartbreak cleared space for a higher alignment. You were never being rejected, you were being redirected. And your enemies, they ended up serving you better than your friends ever did. Not because they loved you, but because they revealed what love never would have shown you. Now you walk with clarity. You're not bitter, you're not chasing closure, you're not seeking revenge. You see, you understand the role they played. You recognize how necessary the betrayal was. And that understanding gave you power. It made you sharper, wiser, more spiritually grounded. That's why you're aligned now. Not because everything went right, but because everything went left and you figured out how to read the signs. So no, you don't need an apology. You don't need them to come back and explain. You silently thank them for betraying you, for showing their true colors, for forcing you to elevate. Because without their sabotage, you would have stayed where it was safe. And now, you're exactly where you were meant to be, on mission, in position, untouchable. Number 13, you exposed their spells by living in truth. You didn't waste your breath trying to convince anyone. You didn't argue, didn't gather screenshots, didn't get loud. You didn't run around explaining what they did to you, begging people to see the truth. You just healed. You focused on your growth, your alignment, your peace. And without even trying, you did what they feared most. You exposed them, not through drama, but through vibration. Your truth became the mirror that reflected their lies. Your peace made their chaos obvious. Your clarity made their confusion stand out like a warning sign. They were banking on you staying broken. They counted on your silence being submission. But what they didn't see coming was your glow-up. Not the kind you post about online, but the internal one. The one where your spirit got clean, your heart got lighter, your mind got sharper. And the moment you stopped entertaining their games, their manipulation lost its grip. Your presence started hitting different. They couldn't joke the same way around you. Their passive aggression didn't land anymore. Their little digs and fake concern couldn't penetrate your boundaries, and without ever raising your voice or exposing their secrets, you exposed their energy. That's what scared them. Because now everyone around them can feel it too. The fake can't hide when the real walks in. People began noticing the contrast. You weren't bitter, you were better. You weren't angry, you were elevated. And suddenly those same people who used to believe their narrative started sensing something off. That's the power of living in truth. It makes lies tremble without you lifting a finger. They tried to curse your name, sabotage your reputation, paint you as unstable, but every move you made in integrity crushed their illusion. Because your healing wasn't just for you. It disrupted the entire energetic structure they used to hide behind. That's why they're uncomfortable now. Not because you exposed them with words, but because your life makes their mask impossible to maintain. You didn't waste your breath trying to convince anyone. You didn't argue, didn't gather screenshots, didn't get loud. You didn't run around explaining what they did to you, begging people to see the truth. You just healed. You focused on your growth, your alignment, your peace. And without even trying, you did what they feared most. You exposed them, not through drama, but through vibration. Your truth became the mirror that reflected their lies. Your peace made their chaos obvious. Your clarity made their confusion stand out like a warning sign. They were banking on you staying broken. They counted on your silence being submission, but what they didn't see coming was your glow-up, not the kind you post about online, but the internal one, the one where your spirit got clean, your heart got lighter, your mind got sharper. And the moment you stopped entertaining their games, their manipulation lost its grip. Your presence started hitting different. They couldn't joke the same way around you. Their passive aggression didn't land anymore. Their little digs and fake concern couldn't penetrate your boundaries. And without ever raising your voice or exposing their secrets, you exposed their energy. That's what scared them. Because now everyone around them can feel it too. The fake can't hide when the real walks in. People began noticing the contrast. You weren't bitter, you were better. You weren't angry, you were elevated. And suddenly those same people who used to believe their narrative started sensing something off. That's the power of living in truth. It makes lies tremble without you lifting a finger. They tried to curse your name, sabotage your reputation, paint you as unstable. But every move you made in integrity crushed their illusion. Because your healing wasn't just for you. It disrupted the entire energetic structure they used to hide behind. That's why they're uncomfortable now. Not because you exposed them with words, but because your life makes their mask impossible to maintain. You didn't need revenge, you didn't need the spotlight. All you had to do was walk in truth. And their shadows started screaming, loudly, publicly. And the best part, you never had to lift a hand. Your authenticity did all the work. Number 14, you were the prophecy they laughed at. Until it came true. They laughed when you were quiet, called you delusional when you spoke up, and rolled their eyes when you said you were chosen for something greater. To them, you were just another broken soul trying to make meaning out of chaos. They didn't see the anointing. They saw the wounds. They didn't recognize the calling. They were too busy judging the process. But what they failed to realize is that the very things they mocked were the exact signs that proved you were sent. You weren't trying to be seen. You were trying to survive. And in that survival, you were being shaped, refined, stretched. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was obedience. Your pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. While they were busy talking, you were being trained by the divine in private. They thought your isolation was a sign you were losing, but spiritually it was the moment heaven put you on lock for sacred download. And now that you've stepped into alignment, they're scrambling. Not because you've changed, but because everything you said is coming true. They're watching doors open for you that were slammed in your face before. They're seeing people who once ignored you now honor your presence. They're watching systems that protected them start to collapse, not because you cursed them, but because you were always the prophecy their spirit recognized and their ego rejected. What they don't understand is that the chosen ones don't need to fight back. They become the evidence. Your healing is the testimony, your resilience is the revelation, your rise is the judgment they never saw coming. You don't need a stage, a pulpit, or a title. Your existence is the confirmation. And now, The same people who once laughed are feeling that quiet burn of regret every time your name is mentioned. They didn't just misjudge you, they missed the fact that they were standing next to a prophecy in human form. You were never the joke, you were the warning. And now that you're walking in purpose, they're finally starting to realize the thing they tried to bury was the seed. And baby, that seed has risen. They thought you were guessing. They thought you were lucky. They thought you just stumbled onto something. But what really happened was divine alignment, ancient memory, soul-level knowing. You weren't just learning, you were remembering. You weren't reacting, you were responding to a spiritual script that was written long before they tried to distort your truth. You didn't expose them with arguments. Your evolution did. You didn't fight back with fists. Your discernment dismantled their illusion. You didn't chase revenge. Your healing became the punishment. And now they're left asking the question they never thought they'd ask. How did you know? It was never a book, never a blog, never a friend who told you. It was your DNA whispering through dimensions. It was your pain decoding patterns. It was your isolation becoming initiation. Every insult they hurled, you turned into fuel. Every trap they set, you turned into a stepping stone. Every time they doubted you, you became the confirmation. You are not just the one who figured it out. You are the reason it was exposed. Your presence disrupts lies. Your growth convicts spirits. Your alignment forces masks to fall. And you didn't need validation, approval, or applause, just obedience to the truth inside you. Now the same mouths that mocked you are silent. The same eyes that rolled are wide open. Because you didn't just prove them wrong. You proved you were right all along. Not through ego, but through essence. You were the truth the whole room felt but couldn't name. And now they know you're not to be underestimated. You're not to be copied. You're not to be explained. You're to be witnessed. And to every chosen one watching, if they're in awe of you now, just wait. Because what they've seen is only the beginning of what's about to unfold. If this message stirred something deep in your spirit, if it confirmed what you've always known but couldn't explain, then this space is for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another download that speaks straight to your soul. Like this video if it resonated with your journey. Drop a comment below and let us know which part hit the hardest. Your truth might set someone else free. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded of who they really are. This isn't just content, it's confirmation. This isn't just a video, it's spiritual alignment. Let them wonder how you figured it out. You've always known. Welcome home, chosen one. The world's been waiting for you to rise. God bless you.